All right, folks. So it looks like I may be the first one to sort of break this story here for you guys, but this is really bad sign. We all know what happened with the Iowa caucus, if you can even call it that. Of course, it was just a complete, unmitigated, complete debacle, as you guys know. They stole the election, gave it to Pete Buttigieg. They lied. They made up numbers that they're still refusing to fix. There's supposedly a recanvass going on. No updates as of yet. I'll update you as soon as any come out, of course, for Iowa. But Iowa used this app, this really shady app called Shadow, or I don't know if Shadow was the company that helped make the app, but they made an app that completely just short-circuited. They did, they obviously cheated. And so Nevada is also a caucus, just like Iowa is, and so that's why we're all worried. And so they were like, we're going to use a different app. And so everybody was supposed to be excited about them saying that they're going to use a different app. Not that, we're not going to use an app at all because it's a very stupid process, but no, they're going to use a different one. So this is a Politico report. It says a complete disaster. Fears grow over potential Nevada caucus malfunctions. There's a lot to read here that I have to show you folks. So it says in interviews, 3 caucus volunteers described serious concerns about rushed preparations for the February 22nd election, including insufficient training for a newly adopted electronic vote tally system and confusing instructions on how to administer the caucuses. There are also unanswered questions about the security of internet connections at some 2,000 precinct sites that will transmit results to a central, quote, war room set up by the NDP. It says, some volunteers who will help run caucuses at precinct locations said they have not been trained on iPads that the party purchased to enter and transmit vote counts. Party officials scrambled to streamline their vote reporting system, settling on Google Forms accessible through a saved link on the iPads, after scrapping a pair of apps they'd been planning to use until a similar app caused the fiasco in Iowa 2 weeks ago. So what they're doing now is they're using Google Forms on an iPad to report their stuff, which is interesting. Don't really see how that's going to be good, but it says volunteers also said the party has not provided sufficient training on how to use the Google form that will compile vote totals. So again, another problem. And so it goes on even more here to talk about this. As one volunteer who has worked on past caucuses in Nevada said, the Google form that will be used to input vote totals wasn't even mentioned during a training session for precinct chairs late last week. We weren't told at all about it, the person said. The iPads weren't discussed until more than halfway through the presentation, the volunteer said. When someone asked how early vote totals would be added to the totals compiled live at each precinct, the person leading the training said not to worry because iPads would do the math for them. So, in other words, the people who are running the show there, right, the precinct chairs, they're not even being taught on what to do. They're not even being instructed on what to do. So the fact that they're not even being trained on how to use the fucking Google form that they'll be using is a really, really big red flag, big time. There were old ladies looking at me like, oh, we're going to have iPads. That's another problem, is that old people don't know how to use technology. So, if they're administering it or whatever, that's going to be very problematic as well. After sitting through the 2-hour training session, the person predicted the caucus would be a, quote, complete disaster. Another volunteer who will be in a senior position at a caucus site said that as of February 11th, the party had failed to provide updated training sessions for caucus day to many people who had been preparing to use the now scrapped apps. Recently, the volunteer did take a refresher course for early voting, but it diverged significantly from the initial training. We were practically starting from scratch. So again, more lack of readiness, lack of preparedness. They're not prepared at all for anything at all. Again, more and more concern. The volunteer received no hands-on training with the iPads before handling one physically for the first time at an early voting site on Saturday. As a result, the first 2 hours of early voting were, quote, disastrous, the person said, as volunteers struggled to get iPads to function properly and connect to the internet. Oh, goodness gracious. They don't even know what's happening. The state party said to purchase Google search ads and newspaper ads to inform potential voters of the early voting option. Another caucus site leader went on CNN Saturday to decry the lack of training on the Google form, calling the process, quote, horrendous. Others with more intimate knowledge of the process, including a state party official and a volunteer who has worked the caucuses previously, contend that backup systems are in place in the event of any technical snafus. The two methods of vote reporting, the Google form and a telephone hotline, will ensure accurate results reach the war room, they said. The process will break down like this. On caucus day, each precinct chair will be given a party-purchased iPad and will have a link to a Google form dubbed a, quote, caucus calculator saved on it. Preloaded on the form will be the early vote total from that precinct. The precinct chair will then input vote totals after the first and second votes, and then the alignment comes in. The prompts on the Google form are expected to look similar to how they look to appear on the physical caucus reporting sheets. And so it's a pretty deep process, as you guys all can see here. It's as if Google form is inaccessible for any reason. Precinct captains will transmit their results solely by phone. And so it says, however, a third volunteer warned that misunderstanding and a lack of training on how to tabulate first and second vote alignments could pose a greater threat to the process than the new tech elements injected into the process. So this is crucial, because what this means is, it means that there's going to be a lot of room for discrepancies that are done by, the NDP/DNC, because the DNC is obviously, they're doing some stuff, and then they're going to end up taking over if the NDP ends up screwing up, as we know they did in the Iowa Democratic, caucus. So they're going to do the same thing here, and that right there is a really, really scary siren to go off, because it means that we can see the same ridiculous first and second alignment vote totals that we saw in Iowa. And so when the Bernie Sanders campaign sent out an email pointing out all of the failures, all the math errors that were against him, they were all because the first alignment and second alignment numbers didn't make any sense, and then as a result the SDE numbers didn't make any sense. So like somehow Bernie would get less SDEs when he had more final alignment votes, or he would have the most first alignment votes, and then in the second alignment he would go down even though he was a viable candidate, which means you can't leave. And so none of these numbers made sense, and so what that means is we're going to see that happening again. That's what that means. Guidelines do not make clear the candidate falls short of the 15% viability threshold can get there on the second alignment. They can do so. The manual provides conflicting information. In one instance, it states that the supporters of non-viable candidates can, quote, join or form a viable candidate. But in another instance, the manual implies that supporters of non-viable candidates can only switch to a viable candidate. So that is bad. That is really, really bad. So what this is basically saying is if there's a non-viable one, they're being told you can turn into being viable, or no, you have to go to an already viable candidate. So that's essentially what that's saying, which is, again, another major, major problem. Super, super major problem. The Nevada Democratic Party undercut the confidence of at least one Democratic campaign when it sent a call-out circulated on Twitter on Friday for technical volunteers to pair with precinct chairs on caucus day. So this is not looking good at all, not even close, because we're going to have a lot of big-time issues with this. Wi-Fi is another issue. If connection at any location fails, iPads are equipped with 4G cellular service. That means each of the 2,000 iPads bought at the party is a paid cellular subscription. But questions remain about the security of Wi-Fi being used at each location. This is really bad. There remains an open security issue with their choice of Wi-Fi networking, said Gregory Miller, co-founder and chief operating officer at OSET Institute. So we hope they're not going to rely on a local building services. That would create a nightmare to protect. The least bad option available, Miller said, is to use a mobile device as a local hotspot to create their own Wi-Fi network and allow the iPads to attach to it. But the truth is, that's last-minute jerry-rigging with vulnerabilities of its own. So basically what this means is this is going to be a total shit show, basically. What we're going to see is a remake of Iowa. I won't be surprised if we don't even get any numbers, when I'm doing coverage of the Nevada caucus. I would not be shocked if it's a replay of Iowa where there's no results that come out because everything is essentially rigged and it's all in this stupid process with an application that's going to fail. And so it's literally just going to be a replay in Nevada. It's going to be the same thing. They're not being trained properly. They're not prepared for any of this. They don't know what they're doing. They're incompetent. And at this point, honestly, they're really just kind of setting it up to be stolen. And so this isn't unprecedented for the Nevada caucus, folks. Like, back in 2016, it was completely rigged. There was a lot of fuckery going on in Nevada back in 2016. So this is not something that's like super new or anything like that. We saw this happen in 2016, and so it looks like it's going to happen again. So we're going to see what happens, man. I don't know who's going to win that if it's not Bernie. I'm not sure which moderate would be able to win it. Don't see Pete Buttigieg winning it. I don't know. It's going to be very odd to see, to be quite frank with you. But thought I'd tip you off on this, folks. Be ready for the worst in Nevada.